Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. And thank you for subscribing to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I am your boy, 12 Kyle. Man, check this out. On this episode, what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the Versus series. If you've been following the podcast, we have been doing a series called Versus, similar to the Versus that we saw during the pandemic, where you would have one artist comparing themselves against another artist, but a little bit different here on the podcast. What we do is we take one artist, preferably a very good artist, and we take two of their bodies of work, two different albums, and we compare it based on the criterion. We'll get to that in just a second. And we score it on a score from 1 to 5, with 1 being the lowest and 5 being the highest, on 5 key components of the criteria. And so we got together and we wanted to do this. It's been a long time coming, but the 2 albums that we will be discussing on this podcast will be from none other than Mr. Michael Joseph Jackson. The albums Off the Wall and Thriller. Now, if you're familiar with music, you know that Michael Jackson dropped these albums back to back, with Off the Wall being the first, and then, of course, the ever-present Thriller. So without further ado, let me introduce my guest. Of course, she's no guest to the show. She's been on here several times. She has her own podcast that drops every Friday. It's called I Can Talk About This All Day. My homegirl, Britt, is in the building. Britt, what up?
Finally back. It's been a while.
Yeah. You know, I didn't realize that it had been. It's been a minute.
Yeah, since we've done one of these. So.
Well, I mean, you know, you got your own podcast now. You don't need me or Baylor to.
Always make time. No. Your series is on your show.
Yes.
Pretty soon, though, I'll be figuring it out and get you guys on. You guys can crash my show.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Definitely looking forward to it. I know that's gonna be a lot of fun.
Yes.
Because you talk a lot of music on your podcast, and a huge music fan, and a huge Michael Jackson fan. And we've had and talked about, and you've debated with our boy Baylor about Michael Jackson and Prince. We're not going to get into that on this episode, but that might be an episode to come. And if you follow the podcast, I've even done a versus between Michael Jackson's Thriller and Prince's Purple Rain. But like I said at the top, we're talking about Off the Wall versus Thriller. I mean, I don't necessarily know if I need to explain to the audience what these 2 albums are. They are incredible bodies of work. Let me say that first and foremost. And they are signature Michael Jackson albums. And I think when you speak to Michael Jackson fans, you will find that there are a lot of people who are passionate about both albums. Of course, Off the Wall was released August 10th, 1979. Britt, you weren't born then. But I wasn't outside. I was in the yard. I wasn't fully outside, but I was in the yard because I was born in 72. And then Michael Jackson's Thriller was released November 29th, 1982. Damn, I can't believe that album is this old. But I was outside in 82, for real.
I still wasn't born yet.
Yeah, you still weren't born yet.
Give me 3 years.
Right. You on the way. You on the way. So before we even get into the criteria, let's talk a little bit about both albums. I guess I'll start with Off the Wall. When you think about Off the Wall, give me like some of your thoughts as you listen, because I know you listen to this album a lot. What were some of your thoughts going back and listening to this album again?
It just takes you back to disco era. And, you know, that's when he first broke from the Jacksons and kind of made his own thing. And I don't know, it always takes me back to disco. Like, I just picture a Boogie Nights kind of thing. And I will say, and we can get into that more when we go through the criteria, but it does make you picture some things that I know I mentioned on your show and J Boog's show. I like stuff that makes me picture things. And so I can picture him, dancing and trying to, get a woman to get off the wall and come
Of
dancing,
course. Of course.
So,
Mike was a player like that. What
yeah.
about Thriller? What are your thoughts going back listening to Thriller?
Going back listening to Thriller, I felt like that had more of, it's going to break off into the criteria talks too, but I felt more of a sense of Michael as far as music. Like I feel that Off the Wall was that introduction, but like Thriller was more of who he is. And not necessarily lyrics, but just the sounds were more of what he wanted and not what was popular at that time.
Yeah, I think I agree. Off the Wall for me, it definitely takes me back to my childhood. It was one of the things that always reminds me of Off the Wall is just like the parties and stuff that the grown people would have, the card parties, going to my aunt's house and just seeing grown people dancing and stuff. And you're a little kid, they push you off into the room like, hey, you get out of here, that type of thing. But I knew who Michael Jackson was, but I didn't know a lot about him. I know that he had, I later found that, he was in a group with his brothers and that they were pretty dope in their era as far as coming up. But he had, like you said, branched off from him. But this album, I will say this much, as I've gotten older, this album the sound has been refined for me. So it looks and feels a whole lot different than it did when I heard it in 79, 80, 81. Conversely, Thriller was everything. I mean, like, Thriller may be the only album everybody had. And when I say everybody, I mean black, white,
right,
everybody.
Well, he set some records with that, not just sales. Like he broke MTV and everything with that one. So he was because of that. And if you haven't seen, everybody out there, if you have not seen the Thriller 40th documentary, forgot what it's on. Don't remember what I watched it on Netflix, something. It talks about it. If you've seen the musical, it talks about it. Thriller, he was the first black person that MTV played.
Yep.
So it wasn't
and that wasn't easy.
All these records, he was making history by being the first black person to be played on MTV.
Right. And that wasn't easy because I actually remember Rick James openly complaining about the fact that he couldn't get play on MTV, but Michael Jackson could. And looking back on it, as much as I love Rick, you weren't like
you weren't. You can't put your whole foot in there.
Yeah, Rick, you was doing some, kind of crazy stuff. We heard the stories later. But Rick was a bad boy. Shout out to Rick, one of my favorites in the 80s. But yeah, Mike, like you said, he was that Michael Jackson, and that Thriller album was everywhere. Like you literally could not go anywhere because, like you said, it was on MTV. It was on network TV. His videos got played on network TV. It was on black radio. It was on white radio. Hell, it might have been on country radio. I don't know.
Who knows?
And I remember a comedian telling a joke that he was saying something and I'm paraphrasing here. He was saying something to the effect of the fact that everybody in America had the Thriller album. And he said even racist white people had the album just because they love Michael's music. Like they were racist and they were rednecks, but even they looked past that just so they could jam to Thriller. And so it was just that big. And I don't know, especially it's kind of hard to describe for a generation that wasn't around. But if Thriller had come out in the social media era, it would be literally the biggest thing since sliced bread, for real.
Not like us.
It would be like 10 times bigger than that.
Yeah.
It would be.
Told me a story that in high school, I guess they had a TV somewhere, not teacher's lounge because they couldn't go in that, but there was a TV somewhere in high school. And when Thriller video aired, because that thing's like, I don't know how many minutes long, it was playing like every 15 minutes.
Yes.
And they would stop and go in there and watch it. Like throughout the day, they just kept watching Thriller on the TV at school. It was huge.
It got major play. I mean, like I remember it coming on, and my cousin, shout out to my cousin Tammy who lived with us, she was scared of the video. She didn't want to watch it. And she's now, keep in mind, she's older than me. So I'm like what, 10, 11, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like 15, 16. She did not want to watch that video. But Thriller was everywhere. You couldn't avoid it. And
Mm-hmm.
Michael Jackson going to the award shows, winning every award that was probably known to man. And then obviously the last thing I'll say about Thriller is those videos changed everything for everybody, not just Black artists, but those videos helped explode MTV.
Mm-hmm.
Because like you said, the Thriller video, the Beat It video, and the Billie Jean video, listen, it was everywhere. Like, again, you couldn't have, if you, I'll put it like this, if you hated Michael Jackson, you were going to love to like him because he was everywhere. You couldn't get away from it, and you couldn't get away from this album.
Mm-hmm.
So that leads us to what we're here to talk about. We're going to break down these albums, and well, actually not break them down, but we have a criteria that we go by because it's easy to just say, hey, which one is better, this one, or that one. But we're going to make it a little bit more difficult. Again, it's a scoring system from 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest and 1 being the lowest. And what we're going to grade them on is 5 criteria. The criteria are: 1, coherence; 2, impact; 3, replayability; 4, lyrics; 5, production. And so we're going to go back and forth for each album, scoring it, and then at the end we will tally up the scores to see which one was better. So let's start first with coherence. Now, coherence, oftentimes there's a theme in an album that is coherent. It might be something that the artist is going through. Sometimes it's a concept album, but it's not necessarily the rule. Sometimes it's just the emotion of life. You can have a situation where an album could be recorded in a week, and maybe just what they felt that particular time is what we hear. Good albums can conjure this emotion for the listener in just a few songs. Great albums do it consistently. So, Britt, if we're talking off the wall, when it comes to coherence under that criteria, tell me what you think and tell me where you would score it.
Okay. This one was hard. I tried. I listened to it a few times for a theme and or where they're at. And really, this one, like I said earlier, it just felt disco. So I just feel a whole disco vibe through the whole thing, but I don't feel, I mean, I guess some kind of love or something, like introduction of love. There we go. Like the beginning. Nothing was really like a true love song in it. Like if you think of I Want to Rock With You, Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. Like it's, I said it earlier. I feel like he's in a club somewhere and trying to like get a woman. I feel like almost the whole, even the song Girlfriend. I'm going to tell your boyfriend. Like, like I'm trying to pull this girl. I don't care if you got a boyfriend. Like, I got that through the whole thing in disco. But overall, like, I had to reach for that. There wasn't one that came to me like really fast. So with that, I'm giving it a 3.
Okay.
I'm giving it a 3. And I'm not doing this, those who are listening, because it's Michael and not Prince.
No, we would never do that.
If we would have done a different album than Off the Wall with Thriller, it probably would have been more. I'm not saying Off the Wall is a bad album. It's just in that category, I can't, didn't come to me.
As I knock stuff down over here. No, that's fine. I mean, your answer is your answer. I saw it different. And we don't necessarily, as you guys know, we're not necessarily going to agree or disagree on some of this stuff. I thought this album was incredibly coherent. What it did was it gave, like you said, the thought and the vibe of being in a disco. In fact, I'll go as far as to say, Britt, that this Off the Wall album is probably the last disco album. I don't know that disco really hit and was as big as it was after this album. I think this might have been the last hoorah, if you will, for disco.
That I agree.
And so Mike was as far as disco was concerned, I mean, like, he was in his bag for real. Like, I don't know that of the albums in that particular era, I don't know that excuse me, I don't know that anybody's touching them. That being said, I think it's a very, while it's not a concept album, I think it is a well put together machine from start to finish. So as far as coherence, I had to give it a 4. I thought it was a very coherent album, and I really like how this sounds and feels phonically when I listen to it. She's like, okay.
No, I can agree with that. I mean, like I said in the beginning, it does have that disco.
Mm-hmm.
That is totally right. It's just I look for a little more when it comes to like a theme and like what it goes with and everything, and I felt like I had to reach too much to try to find it.
No,
like,
that's understandable. And I want to go back to something that you said a little earlier when you were talking about the song "Girlfriend." Be clear, Mike was dirty macking. That's what we call dirty macking.
Yeah, definitely dirty macking.
He said, "You're my girlfriend, and I'm gonna tell your boyfriend that you're my girlfriend."
Yeah,
Mike didn't care.
You'll only be a girlfriend of mine. Like,
that's it. Like, and I picture Michael Jackson with the afro, with the big nose, with the dark skin. I picture him being in the club, in the disco, like, no, you're gonna be my girlfriend tonight.
Yeah, but I don't care.
I don't care about your man or nothing.
Yeah, and I wish we could see that. He just picking that afro and telling her, like,
oh yeah.
You know?
I mean, he's like, I'm Mike. I mean, I'm Mike. Who is your man? So, that's how I see it. So, conversely, when we speak about coherence of Thriller, the huge multi-platinum album, what do you think about that album?
Okay, that one, it got on MTV, and the reason why is because it had more of that rock. Those other sounds to it, like you can hear the guitar, the electric guitar, and a lot of them. And I said this too. This was more of sounds he wanted to hear, and how he wanted to change it, because it's not even close to what Off the Wall sounds like. It was that new sound. It was what everything else was kind of sounding like, but with the mic spin on it. And with this, I can picture, just like an Off the Wall, like I kind of had a little bit of a scene that I could picture. And with Thriller, same thing. He is still dirty macking. But and this is where I get not confused, but I end up crossing over, and I'm trying to separate all these categories and
Understood.
not, I feel like this one actually tells a story. From want to be starting something to, maybe be my, like, I feel like it goes from, oh, you trying to start something, and then telling the girl, like, be mine, and then you got the girl is mine, and then, there's just all these little pieces that kind of build stories. They all tie together. I gave it a 4. But I feel like Mike's sound was put together in this one, and I feel like this whole album tied together more than Off the Wall would.
Okay, that's fair. I don't necessarily disagree. I think with this album, like you said, first and foremost, it sounds so different from what, Off the Wall sounded like. So I can only imagine that 27-year-old player that went to the record store, shout out to the record stores, that went to the record store to purchase this album, and he thought he was getting Off the Wall Part 2.
Yeah.
And he got Thriller. He's like, wait a minute. Yeah, what is this? What is this about some Billie Jean? Who the hell is Billie Jean? Where's my joint? You know, so that type of thing. I just think, like, as great as this album is, I think this album, to me, is a collection of songs.
Mhm.
I don't think it's as coherent. Now, what I'm about to say, I probably would not have said, I don't know, in 85 or 86 or 87.
Mhm.
But I think it's a testament of the productivity, and we'll get into production later. But I think it's a testament of, you know, how it was put together. But I kind of liken this to, you know, you getting the quote unquote dream team. So you got Quincy Jones, you got Rod Tinkerton, and you're putting all of these pieces together, and you got Michael Jackson in the studio singing and writing. And you have all of this, and I just think they got a great bunch of pieces, but if you put the pieces, like when you put the pieces on the floor, they look fine. But if you
Yeah.
put the pieces together, they look even better. But I think they're more individual pieces than they are to match into what would be a proverbial puzzle. That being said, for coherence, I give it a 3. So I don't have it as high.
That's a great analogy right there. The dream. That's a good way to put it.
So now the next category is very difficult. And I always cringe when I hear young Thundercats on social media talking about, oh man, this album is great because they had great impact. Man, if you wasn't outside, you can't talk about impact. But impact is hard to quantify because, you know, it's not something that you can actually quantify. I mean, like, you can't put a number on it. You can't put a feel on it.
It's really your opinion.
It's just your opinion.
But
So
you need facts behind your opinion.
facts. Yeah, you definitely need facts behind your opinion. So although an album might not receive immediate critical acclaim, the repercussions and the influence of the album can be measured across time. That is how you measure impact. So that being said, Britt, what do you have for Off the Wall when you talk about impact?
So that one I struggled with for Off the Wall as far as impact. And to not even talk about Thriller when talking about this one. A lot of people just don't listen to Off the Wall. When I say a lot of people, I'm including everybody. Okay, not to make it about color, but why everybody, right? That's not the one that they are like, ooh, Off the Wall.
Right.
In fact, most people can't probably name more than 2 songs off the wall, you know, but you did have some good ones. Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, Rock With You. But then a lot of people don't know anything else after that. And it's very disco, and not a lot of people, I'm not talking about people after 80.
Of course.
After 1980.
Right.
I can listen to disco. I love disco, actually. But not a lot of people go back and listen to it or even could name disco songs. That album is very disco. I'm giving it a 3 for impact because it's just not one that had a boom. You know, a lot of, and I'm not even going to touch Thriller because we'll talk about that, but if you look at Michael Jackson albums after Thriller, they had more impact than Off the Wall did. Just, you don't see anybody really doing anything of Michael from Off the Wall. You see people doing stuff from Bad, Dangerous, Thriller.
Right.
You don't see nobody out there dancing like he did.
Yeah, because the people that danced to that was old. They was too old then.
Hey, I can use my son for example. Okay, he wasn't even around when Mike was alive.
Right.
Yet, you know, he will Mike jack it up anywhere. But you don't see anything from Off the Wall being carried on like you do from the Thriller, from the Dangerous era, and all that stuff that had an impact because you can see people imitating that.
Right.
I don't see anybody dressing up as Michael Jackson from Off the Wall era,
Mm-hmm.
So
That's fair.
I gave it a 3.
Okay. This album, comparatively to Thriller, is again, they're night and day. But when I think about the impact, I think that again, I go back to my memories of this album when I was little, and then my memories of this album, especially as I got older, and it felt and sounded a whole lot different. And one song in particular, and I'll touch on this in a second. But impact, I gave it a 4. I think again because it was probably the last big disco record, and it might have been one of the biggest disco records for all I know. And now I'm a little bit different from you, where I don't really find myself going back and listening to a lot of disco, even though it got played in my house a lot. It's not a lot that I go back and actually listen to. This is one of them though. But yeah, as far as impact, I had to give it a 4 because if I transport myself back to that time, even though I was little, the thing that I do remember is that there was a lot of speculation and, well, actually, I don't remember. Somebody told me this. Let me go back. My uncle told me this. There was a lot of speculation as to how this album would do because, again, this was Mike venturing off from his brothers. I mean, he had already ventured off from them before, but, this was kind of like a make or break album for him. And so he had to make it happen. And he did. So, impact, I would give this one a 4. So now, conversely, Thriller, impact, what you got?
I mean, I think a 5 because there's so much. I mean, I'm looking at the track list now, and if you go by just what he has for singles, I think out of the 9 songs, 2 of them weren't singles, and everything hit on the charts. And of course, everybody talks about it's the biggest selling album and everything else. But like I said before, this album is the reason why MTV started playing Black artists.
Thanks.
He was the first one. And then the big video for Thriller was huge. I mean, watch that documentary. Like it will just break down everything from watching him put the song together and watching him put the video together and how much work he put into it. You go to Beat It, Billie Jean, and I mean I could venture off into the video aspects of all these too.
Yes.
Beat It, we talked about this, he's got actual street gang members.
Bloods and Crips.
Yep. Did it. Mike did it. And, had them dancing on top of that. It wasn't just like they were doing choreography.
Real choreography.
Yes. And then, you got Paul McCartney. That was his way in to get him to, be played on MTV. You got Paul McCartney on your album. Yeah, it just set so many records. And it was huge and made many motions in history. So I gave it a 5.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. I think I don't know how anybody could give it anything other than a 5. The impact is
I need to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, like this album was everywhere. I mean, and the impact that Michael Jackson, this album had on, like you said, not just Black music, but just music in general, white, Black, indifferent. And then, again, it was something that everybody had, but it was also where, like, we didn't know a lot about, because at this point, Mike he goes from being a superstar to a megastar. And it's not like how today where you can, I could send a tweet to Beyonce and she might tweet me back.
At least
or maybe retweet it. You know what I'm saying? Or she could put out a video and a TikTok dance, or I send her a TikTok dance and then she retweets my TikTok dance on her social media page. You couldn't touch Mike. So like he was such a mystery by this time. Then it had the whole thing with Neverland. What is that the name of the place where he lived?
Neverland Ranch.
Hanging out with Lil Webster and Brooke Shields and like Mike was just, he wasn't weird yet, but he was a star that he didn't do a lot of interviews. And he was just, he'd get up at the awards and he, thank you very much, real soft spoken, but behind the scenes, Mike was like a real dude. Like, like the public persona of what we thought Michael Jackson was something totally different, but we couldn't put our hands on it because we couldn't get close to him.
We didn't have to put everything out there like that.
Exactly. No social media, so we don't know. And so the impact was long lasting. You mentioned Paul McCartney, who does appear on this album, but Paul McCartney actually was on the last album because he co-wrote Girlfriend.
He was.
Which, looking back on it, I see why. So, and Mike appeared on I want to say his next album, because they did the Say song.
Oh, I love that song. I love that song. It's not on that album.
It's what? It's not. Was it on the soundtrack?
I don't know. I have to go back and look, but I like that song.
I remember the video. Now that video got a lot of air. Really?
I never had the song because it wasn't on any of his albums. I just, but I like Say.
That video got a lot of airplay on MTV. And I spent a lot of time watching MTV because there was no BET. So
they actually played music videos. It wasn't TV shows that have nothing to do with music.
Listen, in the 80s, MTV was everything because, especially for a kid like me, because we got cable TV in 1981. So I couldn't see Cameo on MTV. I couldn't see Stevie Wonder on MTV, but I could see Men at Work or Duran Duran or Van Halen. And I became familiar with a lot of the songs and a lot of the popular music that came out back then. Or Twisted Sister. I mean, who didn't remember Come On Feel the Noise? So, and I mean, I'm a kid growing up in South Carolina. But Michael Jackson, this album, as far as impact goes, I had to give it a 5. Before I move on to the next one, let me just run down real quick for those of you who are listening and watching. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you for watching. The songs, both albums only contain, I think the track listing shows 10 songs for Off the Wall, 9 for Thriller.
And we're not counting Thriller 40th anniversary.
No. Just
However, I will say this, though. Have you listened to the 40th anniversary?
I have not. And I need to see that because you're like the fourth or fifth person that's told me about this documentary.
So the documentary, amazing.
Okay.
Everybody should watch it because I think you get a better understanding of the impact and everything, the history on Thriller. But the actual CD, so funny story real quick. One of those songs is on the Michael Jackson Experience on Wii. And it's my favorite one on there. It's my favorite dance. And I was like, I've never heard this song, and then finally I pulled it and I could find it on YouTube where I could listen to it. And it was like Off the Wall demo. And I'm like, Off the Wall demo, and never found it tied to Off the Wall.
Yep.
And then they announced that 40th Thriller anniversary was coming out and it's on that album. So it's on the bonus 40th anniversary, and there's a few other songs on there. They're actually some of my favorite Michael Jackson songs now.
Okay. I definitely got to check that out, and I definitely got to check out that documentary because you're like the fourth or fifth person that has told me like how dope it is. Let's see. Off the Wall starts off with Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, then Rock With You, then Working Day and Night, track 4, Get on the Floor, then side 2. Shout out to the A side and B side.
Right?
Y'all don't know nothing about that. Side 2, Off the Wall, the title track. Then Girlfriend, track 7, She's Out of My Life. Track 8, I Can't Help It. Track 9, It's the Falling in Love featuring Patty Austin. And track 10, Burn This Disco Out. Again, the album was written and produced by Quincy Jones, did pretty much all of the production. Written by the great Rod Temperton, as well as Paul McCartney, Tom Baller. Stevie Wonder wrote I Can't Help It, as well as Suze Green, Carol Bayer, and David Foster. Then we move over to Thriller. Again, like I said, it was just 9 tracks. Side 1, side A, I Want to Be Starting Something. Track 2, Baby Be Mine. Track 3, the aforementioned Girl Is Mine featuring Paul McCartney. Track 4, Thriller. Track 5, which would be side 2, Beat It. Track 2, Billie Jean. Then we go to Human Nature. Then PYT, Pretty Young Thing. And the album ends with The Lady in My Life. Both albums, Thriller's 42 minutes long. Let's see. Off the Wall is, I want to say it's right at 40 minutes.
It's 42 minutes as well.
42 minutes as well. So they're not long albums at all. But I wanted to just give you guys a background as to what we're talking about in case you have not seen or heard these albums in a while. All right, so next,
where have you been?
Right, where have you been? That is a great question. So my next question, the next criteria actually deals with replayability. As far as replayability, there has to be enough quality songs to make you go back to this album. From personal experience, this requires a minimum of 6 songs. So Britt, I will toss it to you. When it comes to Off the Wall, how would you score
I'd give it a 4 because I can let it play all the way through and just let it go. But there's a couple of songs I really could pass on, and Girlfriend is one of those.
Really? Okay.
I can't get into Girlfriend. Like, woohoo! I can't. There's just something about Girlfriend. Like, I could pass on it. If I'm really busy doing something while I'm listening to the album, I might let it ride.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm not, and my finger is available, I am hitting skip. And then let me see. There's another one. It's the Falling in Love.
Okay.
I'm not saying these songs are bad. They're ones I can skip, and also the order of them.
Mm-hmm.
It just, you can tell when you have an album and it like feels, I think I mentioned when we did a Prince one, like it feels like the next one just flows into the next and the next. I don't feel a flow so much in this.
Okay.
I think it's not there. I feel like a couple could be moved around. So I give it a 4 for that.
Okay. You know what's interesting? And I think I kind of see how this is going. I see the opposite. I think like this album for me, I think it flows. The one song I probably could have done without was Burn This Disco Out, but I get why it's there.
The club lights coming on.
Yeah, exactly. It's just the end of the night. It's time to go home. But to start with Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, and and full disclosure, there's an episode coming that was inspired by one of your episodes. The episode is called Say What, and I'm talking about one of these songs, and one of the songs that I talk about is the theme of the episode is hearing things in a song that you don't really
misheard lyrics.
Yeah, you misheard lyrics. And so he's talking about the Force. And I'm like, what the hell is the Force? It's like he starts off this whole album talking about the Force. And, and I thought he said, don't stop with the Flintstones. Don't stop till you get enough. I don't know why I thought he said Flintstones, but it made sense to me at 7, 8 years old. The Flintstones was the hottest cartoon in America. So, but
that makes sense because Flintstones was out then.
Right. So
I will tell you, my son has a misheard lyric on that too.
What is it?
He was 3 or 4 and he swore, like he would argue with me. He swore up and down that it says, pickle with the Force don't stop. Not keep on. He swore to me it was pickle.
That makes sense.
Somewhere I have a video too. He's arguing with me.
The pickle's a Force.
Pickle.
So yeah, I think for me, replayability. When I play this album, I play it all the way through. So I had to give it a 5. Replayability, I give it a 5. Because when I play it, like I said, I mean, for the way that it starts is just incredible. You start with Don't Stop Till You Get Enough Rock, but you working day and night. I mean, like, if I were, go ahead, what'd you say?
No, I was gonna say I feel like it starts off good, but like towards the end, I'm like, eh.
Listen, if I was 27 and outside in 1979, I would be on the dance floor sweating out a perm the first 3 songs.
And some bell bottoms.
Easily. Conversely, Thriller, replayability. What you got?
All right. Before we move on to Thriller, She's Out of My Life was the other one.
You don't like that?
It's not that I don't like it. It's not that I don't like it.
Ooh,
I'm
Britt.
emotional. And if you get me like way too into my feelings, then I get all like I can't. Like it messes up my whole disco vibe. Like,
okay, so let me ask you this question.
Sometimes I skip She's Out of My Life.
Let me ask you this question. Have you ever heard the Eddie Murphy joke about She's Out of My Life?
Which special was it on?
I think it was Raw. If you got to ask, you didn't hear it. And it's okay because you were young.
I just watched Raw the other day. I love those. I'm just trying to remember.
I think that was it. I think that was Raw.
Was it She's Out of My Life, Joe?
I'll find the clip and I'll text it to you. There's a joke that is so funny. Like you, and it's almost like when you hear that part, the end part of She's Out of My Life. Huh?
I remember now because I can hear him doing the mic voice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like that right there, man, listen. Always funny. And it always reminds me of that song.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not talking about
No, I know. I was just asking.
I'm talking about replayability.
That's cool. You get no argument from me. If you say you're emotional and
4, it's not like I gave it a 3 on that. It's just
that's good.
You start upbeat, and I get where you kind of like, you end kind of maybe slower, but it's like I could do without that one. Put that on Invincible. Like
I love Invincible.
I'm not, but going to Thriller, replayability, gave it a 5 because I can let that ride out. I have no skips on that album. I feel like it starts off kind of the same as Off the Wall. Like, want to be starting something and don't stop till you get enough. How like the beat starts ticking in and then it goes off. And I feel like he's got enough where it's like upbeat, but I'm going to bring it back down, and upbeat and bring it back down. It's not like up, oh, and then here. Right. It flows up and down. So, but I have no skips on that, so I gave it a 5.
Okay. What I'm about to say is probably blasphemous for the 12 Kyle from 1984. Playability is at a 3 for me.
Whoa.
Yeah, but I'm gonna tell you why. This album got nothing but play from me all the time. I mean, before I was a hip hop kid, before I was into rap, this Michael Jackson and Prince did it for me. I mean, like those are my guys, and still are. I think over time, what happened was, especially as we moved to streaming, these songs got less and less cohesive as far as like my listening pleasure. So I could put on a playlist, I could put Wanna Be Starting Something. I could put Beat It on a playlist. I could put, Human Nature. Human Nature could get on Slow Jams, Get the Draws tape. And so could Lady in My Life. But to play it together, it lost its luster for me as far as playing the album in its entirety. In fact,
just like taste buds, your earbuds, they change over time.
They change. And so, and don't get me wrong, I love this album. Still listen to it. But probably after we, given it, because we had to, obviously listen to it, getting ready for this podcast, I probably, I never go to Thrill and be like, yo, like, let's start from the top. I'm going to start at Want to Be Starting Something, but when Baby Be Mine, come on, I'm turning it off. I'm going to some other song from another artist. So the replayability for me, it's fallen down. But now, in saying that, I still love to hear the song. I don't like to hear them collectively together on this album in a listening run. So I guess that kind of explains it. It makes sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense when you
Okay.
say it like that. And that's what everything being streaming and everything, it's kind of dumbed down the art of having an album. And I mean, I have playlists. That's what happens when we have the streaming services and we get to make our own things. And
I have a question. Side topic.
Mhm.
I'm gonna ask you the same thing I asked J Book, and I'm gonna lean in when I ask you this.
Oh.
Do you have a ratchet playlist?
Yeah, most women do. It doesn't get played often, but there's times where I'm like, you know what? I'm feeling a little ratchet.
I wasn't surprised that J Book had a ratchet playlist.
You surprised at me?
I'm surprised you got a ratchet playlist.
Wait till you see what's ratchet playlist.
I don't even want to know. And you know what's funny? When I mentioned that to J Boog, shout out to J Boog from the Jay's Quick 3 podcast, our homie. We recently did an episode. What were we talking? We might have been talking about basketball. I can't remember what we were talking about. But somehow that came up, and I was like, J Boog, you got a ratchet playlist? And she was like, oh hell yeah, I got one. I got Meg on it. I got and I was like, and I'm looking at the screen like, I don't even know you.
Yep. Got one. And it says ratchet.
I'm sure it does.
I can screenshot it to you later. It is ratchet.
So when she hears this, she's gonna get mad at me for saying that. I thought that I'm not. I was surprised I'm surprised that you. I wasn't surprised that Jay had one. I'm surprised you got one.
I don't know why.
But that don't mean for those of you listening and watching, that doesn't mean that she's ratchet. She's like ratchet. No. I mean,
no.
I like drug dealer music, and I ain't sold nothing in my life. So right? It is what it is.
I like shit. I ain't no gangster.
Oh yeah, man. Listen, I'm the most gang bangingest listening to music cat around, and I couldn't name 5 gang sets. I'm like Richard Pryor. I'm with whatever gang that's winning. He's like, whichever one is winning, I'm with them.
Yep.
So now we move to lyrics. As I mentioned earlier, 10 on one hand, 9 on the other. So you got basically the same amount of work as far as music is concerned. When you talk about lyrics, how does the artist sound with these words? Do the words ring out in your memory? So for that, let's move to Off the Wall. Lyrically, where do you score Off the Wall?
Lyrically, let me go down this song list again. Working Day.
She's over there struggling.
It's hard. I'm teetering between a 3 and a 4.
Okay, you got to give me one.
I know. And on my paper, when I said I got notes, it says 3 or 4. I never decided.
So you didn't do yourself any favors by doing that.
No, I didn't. I'm going to go with 3. And I'm saying that because I have songs I can skip. And like, I know the words. You play them, I'm going to know the words. But it's just like, I can read the word girlfriend. Nothing's popping out. I hear read Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. It's in my ear how he's saying it, Same with Rock With You, Working Day and Night. I could do Burn This Disco Out. I do like that one. And I can't help it. But everything else, nothing, It's like those memes where they show you a picture, and it's like, if you can't hear this picture, you can't. When I read the titles, nothing's coming. So I'm going to give it. Yeah.
That's fair. Yes. Lyrics, Off the Wall. I gotta say it's a 4. I'm kind of teetering because both albums are very well written. It's really just about how Mike delivers the songs, but Mike on Off the Wall and Mike in Thriller are 2 different Mikes. So it's kind of like, which one do you approve of more, I guess? You know what? No, you know what? I changed that. I'm gonna make an executive decision. I'm going to say that lyrically, I'm gonna put it at a 5, and I'm gonna put it at a 5. And I'll, as Britt, you guys can see, if you see, her eyes are rolling in the back of her head. Here's why I will say, and this is why it'll be. Well, you know what? Let me get to Thriller first. So let's go to Thriller, and then when I give you my Thriller, I'll come back and tell you.
Before before we hop to Thriller, I have never heard anybody be so gung ho over Off the
I
Wall. So this
love
is
this.
interesting because everybody's Thriller, or I've never heard.
And you know what? If you had asked me this, if we'd had this podcast in 1991, it might be a different podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But again, over time, this album really has grown on me. So let's take it to Thriller. What you got as far as lyrics on Thriller?
With that, I'm giving it a 5.
Okay.
Like I said, almost all his songs were hits. And of course, because probably they were played so much.
Of course.
But when I look at the titles, I can hear them all.
Mm-hmm.
I can hear the whole entire song playing. Yeah, and who doesn't also quote some of the stuff, just regular. When you hear "beat it," when somebody says, there's just all.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be starting something, like I can even hear comedians who have
right
said those things, and even take it a step further, other people who have sampled these songs,
yes,
and sampled words from these songs, I can hear it. So I'm giving it a 5.
Okay. Can't argue with that. I'm going to give it a 4. I think. I think you got to give it's apples and apples to some degree because Rod Temperton wrote for both albums. Of course, Quincy Jones produced both albums. So you got a lot of head-to-head competition here, which really they're doing battle with themselves. But the thing, like I said, I wanted to come back to was the one track I think that exists on Off the Wall that Thriller doesn't have is She's Out of My Life. She's Out of My Life is so cold. Mike couldn't do that on Thriller. Thriller was it was too big, it was too pop for him to get down like he does on I Can't Help It. And I think even if you listen to both albums, I don't think he's singing about love and about a woman in like he does in this particular album on Off the Wall as opposed to Thriller. I think that's the one that separates the two albums. Mm-hmm. I Can't Help It is a banger. It's not on Thriller. I don't even know if he had room for a song of that caliber for Thriller because Thriller is so many big pieces. And I think
Can't Help It and Lady of My Life, you can't, or Lady in My Life, you can't.
Lady in My Life is a jam now. Like again,
I know.
It's on the Slow Jams tape. But I Can't Help It. And listen, I'll be honest, Britt. Like I said, if you'd asked me this when I was in college, I didn't feel, but this album really has captivated me more as I've gotten older. And Thriller, as much as I loved it as a kid and much as I listened to it as a kid, it doesn't have the same vibe. It's still a great album, but it doesn't go as high as it once did for me. Still love it. Mm-hmm. So I got that as a, what I said as a 4. Last but not least, production. How does the album sound? How well was it produced? How was it sequenced? Again, we got Quincy Jones versus Quincy Jones. What you got on Off the Wall?
Well, I kind of touched on this earlier. It's almost the replayability and production kind of go hand in hand. But like I said in the beginning, I get the disco sound. Mm-hmm. That's one thing that does not fall off is the disco sound. The only thing I feel like that's more, I don't know. Like I said, they kind of go hand in hand with certain things. But if you're going to go with sequence, I feel like some of them should be moved around because I feel like it's so fast and party and then it drops. And then at the end you burn this disco out. Like it just feels like
you got to end the disco.
I'm going to give production a 4 just because I don't feel that flow throughout the whole entire.
That's fair. I would give the production, I think it's a 4 as well. I think it's a really, really cohesive album. I think the thing that separates it is just the takeoff from this album. The first 3 songs are out of here. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that without looking them up, you'd be hard pressed to find 3 other smokers on any other album at that particular time in any genre of music. So yeah, I would give production. I definitely give it a 4. So then we move to Thriller. What you got on Thriller?
Production on Thriller. That's including sequence and everything. I think I'm giving it a 5.
Okay.
Because, like I said, it was that new sound that Mike was looking for. That is also through. But I mentioned before too, it flows better. There's no like crazy up here and then okay, we're gonna drop down. It literally through the whole thing. I can just ride out through. But the sound and everything, I feel like with this one, even like The Girl Is Mine and Lady in My Life and all, I I feel more emotion in those overall than I do in Songs and Off the Wall. I don't know how I want to explain this.
You're doing a pretty good job.
Well, I mean, so Off the Wall, there's songs I can skip that are softer, right? Like Girlfriend. I don't feel anything for that one, and this one, the slower ones, Lady in My Life, Baby Be Mine, like they pull me in. I'm not dropping out going, oh, I can skip that, so I'm giving it a.
Okay. Okay, so you got a 5 for that. I'm gonna give it a 4 as well. I think there was a point in time where I probably would have given it a 5, but I think as I've gotten older, I don't like the sequences of this album. Because I really think Thriller is misplaced. Thriller is the 4th track. I think, in my little mind, back then, I think Thriller should have been last. I think you could have packaged Baby Be Mine, and I'm not really fond of that song, but it's whatever. I think you could have packaged the 3 slow songs and put them together and closed the album out with Thriller. Another thing about Thriller that I've noticed over the years, if the video isn't playing, I don't really want to hit for Thriller. I really don't. I'm not. I mean, unless it's Halloween, need to get all nostalgic about it. But if the video's not playing, I don't want to. I mean, you're not grabbing the aux and like, put that Thriller on B. You're not.
You're not.
Right? Now, you having a young son who loves Michael Jackson, yeah, y'all get in the car. He wants to hear Michael Jackson.
I'm not tired of Michael.
Hey, listen, I went through the same thing with our daughter. I went through the same. I actually, for our daughter Skylar, maybe about 2 years ago, yeah, because she's like 10. I actually made a Michael Jackson playlist, and like I would take her to school, and I'd be like, "What do you want to hear?" Daddy, play Michael Jackson. So we would listen. So, and then it got to a point where she wanted to hear Michael Jackson every day. Like I just put it on shuffle, and we hear Michael Jackson and it was better than, listening to the crap on, satellite radio. Yep. But I said all that to say this. I just think like, and Thriller has, when you hear Thriller come on, it has what I call a stadium sound. Dun, 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 dun. And I think it's great. But, like I said, that Baby Be Mine, but the production still is great all the way throughout. So I'm still going to give it a 4. So as we wrap up, as we conclude, before we get to the tally, any final thoughts you want to give about both of these albums and what you have come up with?
I feel they're both great albums for different reasons. It's kind of, so what I notice about artists in general, usually their first album is not necessarily them or their sound. Perfect example of that is Pink. First album I love, but that was R&B Pink. And then she never did an R&B album again. That's not who she was. A lot of these artists, this is their introduction because this is what's hot right now and whatever.
Right.
So I feel like that was Thriller. It was disco and he was trying to get in there and make his way and everything else. But then the Thriller album was more of what Mike wanted for himself. So that is one major difference of them, but they're both great albums. obviously it's Michael Jackson, so it's gonna be fire.
Of course.
But that's what I get from both of them. What I do want to ask though,
Mhm.
before we get to tallies too, what is your favorite song off each album?
Good question. Off the Wall is definitely, I can't say definitely. Shoot, it's because the Force and the Flintstones, I mean, you can't get much better than that.
Say that on your show.
Yeah, it's on the podcast. It's coming. It's coming. I've already recorded. I just got to put it out. I got to go with I Can't Help It for Off the
Good
Wall.
choice.
Yeah, Thriller. Man, you know what? Thriller, I'd probably say Want to Be Starting Something because he gave us the famous phrase, Mama say, Mama sama makusa. And I still don't know what that means to this day, but I tell you what, when the beat goes and it's just a clap,
Yep.
listen.
And they talk about that on the documentary.
I gotta see that. That is dope. So yeah, probably Want to Be Starting Something.
Okay.
What about you?
Definitely I Can't Help It on Off the Wall. I love that song. I saw Esperanza Spalding opened for Prince when I went to the concert, and that's how I kind of got hip to her. And then when I looked her up, she did the cover for I Can't Help It, and it sounds almost just as good as Mike doing it. And I just love that song. Thriller is gonna be Human Nature.
Okay. Oh yeah.
Human Nature. That's actually my favorite Michael song in general.
Wow.
But
For
Human
real?
Nature, yeah.
Wow.
I love Human Nature. Like,
That's my
I don't
favorite.
know why. I don't know what it is about it, but I love that song.
My favorite Michael Jackson song is a tie between Remember the Time and Butterflies.
Good one. Good one.
Yeah.
Now, Teddy Riley, Mike Jack.
Oh, hey, listen, that's a whole nother podcast right there. That, I mean,
Bad versus Dangerous.
Well, Dangerous is getting bad out of here. we can
need
do
to
it
next.
We can do that. I mean, that ain't Dangerous is tough. Invincible is tough. Listen. Yeah, Mike, he had some stuff that I really wasn't rocking with, but those couple of albums, yeah. So we could definitely we could put that on the list. So we get to the tally.
Yeah,
we've tallied the votes as I mentioned at the top. Each one of the criteria, and let me tell you again, the criteria was coherence, impact, replayability, as well as lyrics and production. Now, for Off the Wall, we have, let's see what the numbers are. Britt scored Off the Wall. Her scores tallied up to 17. For me, Off the Wall, my scores tallied up to 22. For Thriller, Britt's scores tallied up to 24. For me, my scores tallied up to 19. So, in case you hadn't figured it out, Britt scores Thriller higher than Off the Wall, and I score Off the Wall higher than Thriller.
Which I feel was very obvious.
Yeah, I mean, you could kind of tell that's just the way it was going. But again, great albums. Definitely, as always, appreciate you for coming through. Before we get out of here, Britt, tell folks where they can find you, where they can hear your podcast, and where they can check you out on the socials.
Wherever you listen to podcasts, I can talk about this all day with Britt Renae, and I'm only giving out the Twitter, and that's Britty 18, BRITTY 18.
And when does the podcast come out?
Every Friday.
There you go.
Wait till you hear this week's.
Hey, I'm tapping in every Friday. Yeah, so
one of the first ones to tap in every Friday. Yeah. So
that's the thing. Like when you're consistent with the podcast, it becomes a part of people's, daily routine. So when Friday comes, I'm looking for yours. So
I never missed one. I've been going since the beginning of December last year.
There you go.
And even with no voice, I still was there.
Yeah, you did. I was like, man, why did she put out this podcast? She gonna go back and be like, man, I shouldn't have put that out.
Nope.
But
Nope.
it's good. I mean, you showed up. You showed up for your people.
Yeah, because I was like, look, I'm not going to start already and miss one.
Right.
Keep going.
Totally understood. Totally understood. Well, you guys have been listening this long. Hopefully, you know where to find me. 12 Kyle and the 12 Kyle podcast drops every Thursday and every Sunday at midnight. Make sure that you subscribe. We also have a YouTube page. The great thing about the YouTube page is that we have both video and audio. So if you want to just listen to us, which on this episode you want to see us because we got all the facial expressions and the laughter and graphics and everything like that. You can catch me on social media at 12 Kyle at 12 Kyle podcast on Twitter X, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, TikTok. If you want to support the show, we have merch. Look in the description box. There's a link that says merch. Click that link and you can get 12 Kyle Podcast mugs. We have 12 Kyle Podcast posters, t-shirts, hoodies at a very low price. And if you want to throw us some money, we'll take it. Hey, I'll take $1 or $2. Cash App, $TWELVEKYLE. And so that's going to do it for us. We have discussed Off the Wall versus Thriller with my girl Britt. I am your boy 12 Kyle. We'll catch you guys next time. 5,000.